Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. So welcome, everyone. You know, every second Tuesday, second Friday, third Monday, we get to chat with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. And today we're very excited to have David DeGolyer back on the show from Explore Steuben. And this is upstate New York. We're talking the Finger Lake region. We're talking wine today, and not just wine of what you can experience today, but we're going to go into the roots of what makes it such an amazing wine destination. I encourage you to go to their website, exploresteuben.com, because they are stupendous, as we always say here when Dave comes on the show. But the link is in the episode notes as always. And also for IFWTWA, the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association, go to IFWTWA.org. So Happy New Year and welcome back, Dave. How are you?
Thank you. Happy New Year. I'm doing awesome. How about you?
I'm doing good, but you know, I read through this whole wine part, and you've been on the show a few years now talking about the arts like corning and glass,
Right.
and you've got such rich history, aviation history. You've got, I mean, the history of your whole region is a little insane, but in a good way, right?
Yeah.
Rabbit hole for nerds like me and other
Yeah.
people that really know what they're looking at. I just get into it and go, I don't know what this is, but it's cool. And then the nature that you have surrounding you. We've talked about small towns that are making up Steuben County. Ice cream, hamburgers, and wine and beer, outdoor adventures, right?
Yep.
So we've talked a lot about this, but today we're really zoning in on the wine, but we will talk about what you can do in between wine tastings because we got to balance out.
Yeah,
It is
for sure.
January, right? Teaching us the balance. But yeah. So for new listeners and for folks who have not been to Steuben County, give us kind of an approximate destination, like from New York City, because, you know, I always say we say New York and our minds go right to NYC.
Yeah. I mean, and so we're in the southwestern, south central part of New York State. So we're not far from the Pennsylvania border, and we're about 4.5-hour drive from Manhattan, depending upon when you drive, right? So, I mean, if you're coming in the summertime, when there's construction, it might be a little, like another 45 minutes, but somewhere between 4.5 to 5.5 hours drive. So we're about 4 hours from Philadelphia, about 6 hours from Boston. We're kind of a straight shot east from Cleveland, Ohio. So, we're about 5 hours directly east of Cleveland, about 5 hours from Pittsburgh. So we're really located in an area that's about 3 to 5 hour drive from 25% of the population in the country. I mean, the whole northeastern and middle Atlantic area. And it's a rural area. So there's, as you mentioned, there are a lot of small towns. We have like 60 communities just in Steuben County. And most of those are, hamlets and villages and towns. The Corning, which you talked about, the art, and, that is about 11,000 people. So again, I consider that a small town still, even though it's considered a city. Oh, they're smaller communities, really beautifully and scenic, as like the photo behind you is Hammondsport, and that's KUKA Lake, which is where most of the wineries are for Steuben County. So it's, there's these charming towns. It's like going back in time in a way, because there's that small town Americana, the traditions and the kind of, just the kind of visual, the aesthetic of it is maintained. So it's kind of like, again, going back to, something you'd see in a Hallmark movie, or, the small town. The charm is just palpable, really.
It's
you
real.
can feel it. You feel it when you go there. Because it's a slower pace, but not slower in a way of you're sacrificing. It's slower as in you just can get away from the hectic part and, kind of just really settle in and savor the moment. That's what we're really talking about this year, is just kind of slow down, savor the moment, spend some time, reconnect with yourself, but have a great experience. There's world-class experiences in these small towns.
Well, I think that goes with sipping wine, right? Is about sip and savor, they say. And it's really about the experience, not necessarily the quantity. I know we're talking in dry January. I don't like dry January. I like my wine, but it's about having an experience. It's, sit down with friends, maybe make new friends while you're traveling. And it's a tasting experience, which is not a rushed experience. There's no such thing as actually tasting wine in a hurry. And if you're doing that, well, you're missing the whole point of it. But I think what's so great about your region, about being so close to all these cities, is that number one, it's like 5 hours is like the perfect amount of time, even between 3 to 5, actually,
Yeah.
depending on who you are, to really be able to say, I'm getting away, but I don't have to go like 2 days drive away. I can
Right.
get away and make it like, it makes it more affordable, actually, in a
Yeah.
way. And you feel like you've gotten away from where you are. And by the time you get there, you get past road rage, hopefully, or you're escalated, then you'll get to a really good place. And then you go, all right, it was worth the road rage. It's so cool here. So whatever it is, it's going to be good. What about airplanes, airports, like for people flying in from like, New York City, or,
Yeah.
even, you're talking about Cleveland. Cleveland rocks music.
Heard that.
Sorry. As soon as anyone says
You know,
Cleveland, I just go to music. Sorry, detour in my brain.
the there's a small airport, the Elmira Corning Airport. So it's 10 minutes from downtown Corning. It's from Hammondsport. It's about 45 minutes. But people can fly right in there. They have Delta. They have they have Allegiant, which has been increasing their flight options there. So there's quite a few flights that come in there now. But that's a smaller airport. There's also smaller airports like Ithaca also has a smaller airport, and
Okay.
then yeah, on the periphery of the Finger Lakes. Finger Lakes is 14 counties. About over 9,000 square miles, so it's massive. That you can fly into Rochester, New York, which is about an hour and 15 minutes or so from Hammondsport. You can fly into Syracuse like 2 hours from Corning and Hammondsport, so you can fly into those bigger international airports if you want, rent a car and come. It is definitely a drive destination. It's not, you're not going to get here by train. You can take a bus if you want from New York City to get to a certain part. You could get to Corning or, probably Bath, but then from there, we don't have the Uber infrastructure that you'd have in a big city. So there are a few Uber drivers and stuff like that, but you're probably going to want to get yourself around. And because we have the small towns that are probably, 15, 20, 30 minutes apart, and just like going to the wineries and that sort of thing, you're going to want to kind of set your own pace. I think, that's the thing you mentioned. Once you get here, that 5 hours, you leave at 8 in the morning, you're here by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You've got the next several
Perfect time
days.
for check-in.
Check in and, just relax and explore a little bit, have a great, meal, go down by the lake, get on the water if you want, and then, start your whole, just kind of settle in. And then you've got however many days you want to spend and explore. And the things are so, accessible. So there are 11 lakes, the three biggest ones for wine are the three kind of in the middle. You've got Cayuga Lake, Seneca Lake, and then the one behind you is KUKA Lake, which is in Steuben County. It's the only one not shaped like a finger. It's a Y-shaped lake, but it's like they're only 30 minutes apart. Like, so you could get from Hammondsport to Watkins Glen and where all these beautiful waterfalls are, 19 waterfalls, and go through the state park in a half an hour. So, and then you can go have completely different experiences, so there's a nice variety. It's a great combination of outdoor experiences, cultural experiences, history, and, real time, quality time. Like you said,
Yeah.
wine, the thing about wine, it isn't, it is about the experience. It's about whether it's, you're going by yourself or, and you're learning and tasting something that you like, or you're going with friends or family and you just kind of take your time and settle in and have those moments that you're going to remember. It's not just about the alcohol part of it. It's really, that's just a vehicle for kind of like experiencing the taste of the region, and something that's agriculturally produced. So it's locally made, it's all really a part of the culture.
No, I think it's so important to be where the grapes are, which I know most of them started as table grapes, right? And so then it's like, oh wait, we have this side. We can make these into wine. Okay, now I'm coming.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really, and wineries, I'm so passionate about winemakers and the investment they bring to a community. It's not just, hey, I'm setting up a winery. It is an investment into agriculture, and you're playing, Russian roulette with weather and, the financing of it all.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go against wineries. The challenges that they go through to get us these amazing bottles of wine, and then only for the wine to run out, and then they make a new one so the old one's gone.
Right?
that's why to me, it's like when you have those experiences, it's like temporary art
Yes,
that
it
you're
is.
sipping.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, really. I mean, you think about a soda product or some kind of these products that they're all, basically formulated and they're always going to be the same. It's manufactured, right? But yeah, this is organic. This is the where the vineyard is, the soil in that vineyard is going to be different. And from another vineyard that's maybe a couple hundred yards away, you could have the same grapes in there, and they're going to taste completely different. I mean, so there is that combination of farming and agriculture. There's a science behind it. Uh, there's art. It is creative. They come up with different ways to really kind of change. To most of our winemakers, I will say, don't really try to do a lot of extra stuff to change things. They really kind of try to bring out the grape, the essence of
Mhm.
the grape, and let the vineyard and the grapes do the talking. Basically express themselves. But like you said, I mean, there's so many variables between rain, frost, snow, cold, I mean, just dry. Like I mentioned, when we were talking earlier, that we had a drought last year. It rained in May, and then for 6 months, we ranked maybe three times, so, they got to deal with all that and adapt and adjust to make sure that the grapes still have the opportunity to really shine.
Bring that sugar out. We want that
Yeah.
sugar. And then
Yeah.
we have to deal with residuals. But it is, it's so fascinating because it is a craft, it's an art, and sometimes the biggest challenge is create the best wine as
Yeah.
well. So a drought sometimes means you have better wine. We just don't know. It goes to how the grapes came out and the skill of the winemaker, and sometimes it's a bust, sometimes it's a, "Oh, wow, look, we made wine out of grapes." I don't wanna say lemons to lemonade, I just did, but,
Yeah.
you know
No, I mean, and we talked a little bit about the history here. So I mean, this is where you mentioned the table grapes. The Finger Lakes wine region, which I will just throw a little shout out because it was just recently named the American Wine Region of the Year,
Yes.
by wine enthusiasts. So that's a pretty big deal, and we've really been getting a lot of recognition over the past decade or so. I think people are like discovering it, even though they live so close, but also you know um, recognizing that the quality of the wine, but then also the quality of the experience, which, it's a little different, it's not just about how good the wine is, but it's about how good the experiences of enjoying it, and the Hammondsport right there are probably 14 wineries right around the bottom part of KUKA Lake. There are about 20, 22 around the whole lake. And each one has its own personality, each one has its own, specialty. But when they started back in 1829, the first grapes were planted in Hammondsport in the whole region. They were definitely it was a farming adventure. Well, actually, it was a minister who planted them because he was making sacramental wine, and then he encouraged the local farmers to take that on as a potential crop. Some of them did. In the 1850s, they were shipping tons of grapes to New York City for table grapes, and people were just, I mean, literally devouring them. They couldn't get enough. But then once they were able to bring grapes in to New York City from other parts of the world, because of the way transportation evolved, then the people here who were making all these had all these grapes, or had to figure out a different thing to do with them. So at one point around Cuca Lake alone, there were over 22,000 acres of grapes. And right now, the whole Finger Lakes AVA has about 11,000 acres of grapes. So there were twice as many grapes being grown just around that one lake than there are in the whole region now.
Wow.
So, obviously things had to evolve, but people started making wine. The first winery in the region was founded in Hammondsport as well in 1860. They won some awards, in Europe, the first winery to win awards in Europe for sparkling wine. And that kind of just really, 1800s, that was a booming area for wine, but it was a completely different experience than it is today because
Mhm.
all those native grapes were very sweet. So the stuff you make grape juice with and, apple or grape pies and different things. So most people who really well, a lot of people who are wine connoisseurs or love wine, really want those drier wines or those European style wines, and it took over 100 years before anyone could figure out how to grow them in the northeastern United States. But that also happened in Hammondsport. So we were fortunate that someone came from the Ukraine area and came here and said, "Hey, I know how to grow these grapes here so you can have these wines, so he got ignored for quite a while, and then finally someone gave him a chance, and it revolutionized winemaking in the whole northeastern United States. That history and that culture is just ingrained into the communities, and it comes out in the quality of the wine, but also in the experiences that you have, I think.
This is so exciting because to me, when we look back in the roots of it all, it gives us an opportunity to understand like what somebody went through to help, right? And
Right.
often it's this underdog story,
Yep.
and so when you look back in history, I always want to go, let's look at today. Who are the underdogs that people are just not looking at and just give them another look?
Right.
Maybe don't wait for them to be popular. I look at that in music, right? There's so
Mhm.
many great bands out there and you see them, especially indie music now. And I love it. We've interviewed some that were, coming up and I'm like, this is really good. I'm a big music person and a
Yeah.
musician as well. And I'm like, oh, this is something. And then one day they hit it big time with Grammys. And I'm like, I had them on the show way back when I was part of that. But it
Yeah.
feels good to back those people, and I think that's so important to keep their story going because it also gets people to not give up hope. When you're really trying something and maybe everyone around you doesn't get it, to keep going. And for
Mhm.
us, a reminder to help those people who are still trying something they truly believe in. So that is the story of America. We're at America 250 right this
Yeah.
year. So
Yep.
I feel like that story. And then you have some aviation history. I mean, you have wine and flight, and
Yeah.
we could have a flight of wine or we could fly first, then have wine. Maybe that's a good way of doing it. Two different
Probably.
flights in
Yeah.
Hammondsport, right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, yeah, the history is pretty awesome, and as you mentioned, it is kind of the essence of the American experience. Is that resiliency, but also that the underdog, kind of that people taking a chance on doing something and having it turn out to be something spectacular, and like you said, being part of that. It's kind of like sharing a secret. You come across something and you're like, oh my god, I can't. On one hand, you kinda wanna keep it to yourself just so you can enjoy it. On the other hand, you can't wait for everybody else to know about it. You're like, "Oh my god, this is so
Yeah.
good." And, there's a lot of, those I'll touch on the aviation in a second, but, you were talking about the underdog and, one winery is Bully Hill that's really popular, and the thing is, when the after the prohibition, right? So there were, like, 20 some wineries in the region prior to prohibition, and it was booming. And then after prohibition, there were six, and a couple of them just survived by making sacramental wine or making grape juice, and then telling people how to not make wine. Like what don't mix the stuff with the grape juice because you might make wine. But after that, when after prohibition, when things started to rebound and stuff, my brain just stopped in the middle of what I was saying. Most of the wineries were bigger, that you had to have a lot of money, you had to have a lot of, resources to actually have a winery. And, basically, Bully Hill, the pioneer there, Walter Taylor, was a very big advocate for the small farmers. He wanted to make sure the grapes were grown here in the region, they weren't shipped in. And he really was an advocate for, the opportunities that. So in 1976, they passed the Wine Act, which allowed these farmers to then sell their own wine, which is what like when you go to the Finger Lakes today, you'll see all these little boutique wineries. So there are a few. Bully Hill's a big one, but you'll see most of them are these small little boutique
Mhm.
wineries that where the winemaker and their spouse or significant other are the two people running the tasting room, and they're also making the wine and they're building the structure, and so it's
And
just.
may even have another job on the side too.
Yeah, and they're doing all this stuff, and you're like, "How do you do all?" And then they're making this great wine, and you get to go, and a lot of times you'll actually get to meet with a winemaker or the owner or something like that, and, especially this time of year because it's a lot slower,
Yeah.
usually oftentimes the winemaker is the one giving you the tasting, but so you get to be part of that story, like, you get to be part of that. You seeing these people who are
You're
just
helping
starting
their
out and helping
history.
them. Yeah, and they're taking a chance and doing something they're passionate about. And as you mentioned, when you're creative and you're passionate about something, not everybody else gets your passion and your vision. So when you actually see somebody who's excelling at that, and then they're kind of on the trajectory that they're going on. Like Vice Vineyards is one of those examples. He came here as a winemaker from a winemaking family in Germany, came and worked for Dr. Frank's, and then started his own winery with his wife, who we met in here in Hammondsport. They started their winery in 2017, and so 3 out of the last 4 years, they've been the New York State Winery of the Year. So, I mean, they've just started their own thing and, taken off, and you're just seeing this evolution of not just the wine, but the experiences people have when they go there. It's a special thing.
That's
Um,
so awesome. And I think it's, you're part of that history of making someone successful when they need to be successful because they're
yeah.
doing something right, right? And so you're part of that. And when we talk about travel and tourism and being sustainable, is it regenerative? Is it transformational? Isn't it experience? All these buzzwords, right? I'm just going, go have a true, authentic time.
Yeah.
Authentic gets used a lot too, but it's really about it. Just go have a real good time. Meet people, even if, the winemaker's not there and you're getting the person that's giving you a tasting, talk with them. Find out what it's like to live there. Half the time, most people end up going, I think I might want to move here,
Yeah.
and I
Quite a
don't
few.
blame you,
Yeah.
so, but that's the thing is it's that human connection. And I think after COVID, we really understood that importance of the human connection. And then we got wonky and we all work from home or wherever, which in the tourism world, sometimes that's not a bad thing. We could be doing this podcast from anywhere. I mean, I travel full time. So who knows where today I'm in Georgia.
Yeah.
And actually I could just drive up the road to you. But so that allows people to travel midweek. It allows them to travel off season,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
right now, like you're saying, it's not that it's cold, but like go into a winery, you'll warm up and have a good glass of wine. So I
Right.
think it's just such a cool time now to see people change their attitude of travel to be beyond the typical I'm just going to go sit on the beach or
Mhm.
poolside and drink cocktails. We've
Yeah.
evolved and as whereas our country may be fighting and all this stuff is going on, it's also the year of America 250, which makes me want to remind people that we are this community, this is a huge country.
Right.
And we all come from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of cultures, all kinds of countries. And the beauty of wine is part of that. The beauty of the history of aviation, we'll talk about in a little
Yeah.
bit. Writers, poets, all of it. Every walk of life of America is shaped by all these different people coming together. And I think New York State is one of the most crucial states when we talk about it. Massachusetts, the Northeast is truly important when we look at this history of all these people. You're talking about it, here's this gentleman coming in from Ukraine. Well, thank goodness we wanted him. So it's part of our American experience when we think about this. And when we look at Finger Lakes, I know that it's not just a national treasure. This also represents us globally when visitors come here and when wines go overseas.
Yeah, and I mean, you go into that small town, right behind you is the center, is the square, the town square. Those little towns all have that town square, which is the gathering place, right? It's the hub for the
Oh,
community, and I mean that in a way is the essence is it is people coming together. There's a sense of community in each of these little places that you go that kind of ripples into the visitor. Gets that experience. They feel like they belong. They feel like they're part of that community, and I think that's an important part about travel too, because it's like, we're so immersed in our lives every second, that to take our step aside even, and step into a different experience kind of gives you a different perspective on your own life, but it also you can kind of absorb some of those things, those positive vibes
hmm
and, the energy and that sense of community, which, like you said, after the pandemic, we realized how integral that is. I mean, just how people crave that even though they don't necessarily realize they do. And it's just like the water behind you, going by nature and going by water. I think that's another thing people have been realizing the last 5 years is just being outside. Like we're all solar powered, where we have a connection to water. We just don't necessarily consciously think about it. But when you go by the water or you're on the water or in the water, there's just your mood changes. I mean,
It's
just
embryonic.
physiological
Yeah.
changes and mental and emotional, like so many things. And it's a simple thing, and it's something that we kinda take for granted and don't, like I said, don't necessarily think about. But when you're out there or you're out on a hike in the woods and it's just, you 4 of you are out for a hike and it's quiet, and there's the birds and you see some nature, maybe you see a fox or whatever, and it's just cool, I mean, and you're just kinda slowing down and really being in that moment, and that's another thing that, we sometimes don't allow ourselves to do, so that's also something you can do in these places.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We need to go back to our roots, and we are from
Yeah.
a natural nature roots,
Eh,
being outside seeing a fox is a blessing, right, to me.
yeah,
It's kind of that, oh yeah, this is where we come from. We may have built all this stuff. And that leads me to the history of the area, obviously winemaking history and sparkling wine. By the way, I
uh-huh.
think you needed to make sparkling wine just to celebrate all the wine and
Yeah,
the winemakers and all the people involved in it. Keeping you have all these small communities, and sometimes, yeah, you're gonna have to have one side it's for the big stores and all that stuff, right? That we know we all use, but we all
yeah,
like the cringe factor. But there's the small town, like you say, there's the downtowns, there's the squares, there's all of
right.
that. In the Southwest, it's the plazas.
Yep,
And when the integrity is left, so you know who built this. There's that term, and I know listeners, I'm so sorry I keep bringing this up, but it's such a truth. To go forwards in anything in life, you must go back to understand the history, period. To
yeah,
understand and have respect. And I think when communities really keep that integrity of just even the buildings and like a family farm going down in generations, even if it's someone else running it, that there's that story. And just you being on the show today is like everything is a story. And I'm like, this is so awesome. I could sit and listen to all
mm,
these stories, but I wanna go there. Like, now I'm, like, a
yeah,
little itchy to get going. It's the stories, and when we lose those, then the identity is gone, and it really seems like your whole region of Steuben County and surrounding area has done such a like, it never thought of, "We're not gonna lose." Like, it just to someone on the outside, it feels like it was never even a question that it was gonna go away.
yeah, I mean, and I hopefully it hasn't ever been and hasn't, won't ever be because, I mean, I think it's just a kind of an ingrained, inherent part of who we are here, and again, I used the word culture a couple of times, but in Corning, culture is built around the class, and art. In Hammondsport, 30 minutes from there, it's really built around the wine, the lake. So lake life is a big part of the culture. The wine is a big part of the culture, and the agricultural element. And then, as you mentioned, aviation ended up being,
We have
you know,
teased that all show long,
yeah.
haven't we?
But I mean, that ended up
We'll
being
get there, people.
that's also part of the culture too. So that like, just people who've grown up here have embraced that, and, they've held on to that, and while all those bigger stores and stuff that you mentioned, they're important and they're useful and they're, convenient, and there's a place for those, and that town, like, behind you, they've maintained there's none of that is there, I mean, you're gonna have to drive 20 minutes, you can in 20 minutes, you can have access to any of that stuff. But in there, you're going, like I said, you're kind of going back and you're walking through history, really, is what we're doing. We're history is an integral part of the foundation of everything that's there, but you actually get to live it too. I mean, you get to actually experience it. Whether you're going to we'll talk about the aviation, you're going to the Curtis Museum, you actually get to see the past in real time, and, Glenn Curtis grew up in Hammondsport, and, he at that time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he had an 8th grade education, which is pretty much as far as most people got 'cause they worked, but he was, just, he had this passion for going fast, and he raced bicycles, so you talked about the KUKA Gravel Classic, which is coming up in June. It's a really popular gravel race. Well, Glenn Curtis was in the late 1800s was racing his bike around Hammondsport when they didn't have paved roads and stuff. And he wanted to go fast, and he was also a tinkerer. He was an inventor, and he built this motor, put it on a makeshift bicycle, and then went down to Florida and rode 136.36 miles an hour on a beach in 1907. So I mean, he was the fastest man on
That
earth,
is so
right?
cool.
So he went from riding bikes around town to putting a motor on it and being and he's one of the early motorcycle pioneers, right around with Indian and Harley, same time frame. And but his ability to make these motors was so exceptional that aviators said, because flight was really in the early 1900s was a thing that was on a lot of inventors' minds. They thought balloons, the dirigibles, those were going to be the next big thing. So dirigible balloonists came to Hammondsport, put their factories there, were buying his motors and experimenting. Alexander Graham Bell was part of a group called the Aerial Experiment Association, and they came to Hammondsport with Glenn and recruited Glenn Curtis to try and create functional airplanes. And they built 4 airplanes, and they were flying them off the lake. They were, Glenn Curtis had a part in helping develop seaplanes, which you normally think of in a movie about Alaska, but they actually were using KUKA Lake for that. He invented seaplanes. He invented, so he went from riding his bike fast and putting a motor on it to flying. He didn't set out to fly. That just evolution kind of happened. And all that happened right in the area behind you and a little bit, a couple miles away in the valley. Now you can go to the Curtis Museum and see these early, replicas of these early airplanes, see some of the actual airplanes themselves, and learn about this guy who most people have never heard of, but he is the first pilot license in the country. He's considered the father of naval aviation, father of the American aviation industry. He was a really important part of our aviation progression, and nobody, really knows a whole lot about him, but you can visit the town where he was from, learn about him. They have an event right on that lake called the Wings and Wheels. It's like a seaplane homecoming. So there's seaplanes in September. They're flying on off the water. You go down. It's a big festival. It's a lot of fun. So that culture again is part of. It's just immersed in the fiber of everything here.
I love this story again, isn't it? Going back to that, the unsung heroes in a way,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
communities keep people alive. And
Yeah.
that's, for us as travelers to explore and find these stories, because I think we go to the Wright brothers over and over again, right? Which, of course, right for the Wright brothers, you
Yeah.
know. But when you think about what he did, and yes, because balloons, I mean, that was the first thing. Hot air balloons were the first thing. And Montgolfier, wasn't it the Montgolfier balloon or something that went up? Anyway, I'm going to mess myself up
I'm not
on
sure.
all those pronunciations and who, what, and where. But when you think about also where you were positioned, I believe your region was also kind of instrumental in aviation being used in warfare in the
Yeah.
world wars. In World War
Yeah.
One is when we started it, which was a unique thing. And there were Yale students from Yale who were, pretty much paid for with what they were doing in studies. And they said, well, World War One's happening. Let's go in there. And the Millionaires Club, I think, or Millionaires Unit came in and really set up how to fly. Your whole region and into Florida and parts of England, they really did a lot of training.
Yeah.
So did that touch on you, that part of
So,
it?
yeah, I mean, so a couple things related to that. I mean, between 1907, so when Curtis rode that motorcycle, and World War One,
That's so cool. I think is there a movie about him yet?
there's like a documentary about him. It's mostly photos, and narration. But yeah, there's a really cool video, and it's if you go to the museum, they play it there, so you can sit there
Okay,
at the
cool.
theater. You can sit there and watch it, or you can buy it. Might be available on YouTube or something as well. Yeah, it took him a mile just to stop at the motorcycle, I mean, and part way into the ride, it was going so fast that part of the frame, like, cracked, and he had to kinda hold it together with his legs while he was driving. He had this passion for going fast, and then he was kinda like, "Ah, that satisfied me for now," because he was basically riding, it wasn't a rocket ship, but it was basically a motor built for flying, and it was a V8, so it was, it wasn't they never had those back then, so this was a completely new. He was really at the forefront of a lot of things. And Hammondsport was, from that 1907 to World War One, the hotbed of experimentation and innovation in aviation. So, like, the Wright brothers were the first to do it, but they kept everything secret,
Mm.
right? So he had the first public flight in America in 1908. So thousands of people came to watch fly, right? So it wasn't just this harebrained idea that these inventors have. Now, actually, like, oh, it's a real thing. that people saw, witnessed. He'd had the first long distance flight in the country from Albany all the way down to Manhattan, which then it was like, maybe this can be a form of travel, right? Transportation. So he was kind of on the front end of what we all take for granted today of, that you can fly someplace and get there. So he had a part in all these things. He, like I said, he helped develop the ability to kind of take off and land the seaplane better right on that lake, and then also the flying boat. So the Navy recruited him to be basically help out with naval aviation, and he became the father of naval aviation. So he created these schools to teach people how to fly. He taught the first female pilot in the country. He taught the first, I believe, African American pilot in the country. There's like all these. He taught the
Wow.
first like Puerto Rican pilot and the first Japanese pilot. He taught all these people how to fly. But then he also set up a school in Coronado, which is right next to San Diego,
Yeah.
California, which still exists today. That the base there was started as a school that he created to teach the military how to fly. So he's a very integral part in all that, the evolution of that. He created the Jenny airplane, which in World War II, I believe, that was like the main training plane. It's that old school biplane that you see that the
Oh, yeah.
barnstormers do stuff with. That was an invention that was his airplane that was used. That was the most widely used training airplane. After they made so many of them that after the war, there were so many around that people could buy them cheap. So that's when all the barnstormers were doing stuff because they could buy an airplane for pretty cheap, and start doing all these tricks. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff is part of the fabric of our entire country's
Wow.
aviation history is right from that in town.
That's amazing. And then here's all this wine, and you
Yep.
need the wine, like I said, and the sparkling wine just to cheer you all on because you keep doing all these amazing things. And then like the KUKA Classic, I wanted to talk about that
Yeah.
because the bicycle is a big deal. And I keep thinking now, I remember having a friend who turned his bicycle into a motorized bicycle. And, so it's not a motorbike, but you see people on these all the time now. So this is not a new thing, but
No.
we've been treating it like a new thing, but this is what he did way back when, you know?
Yeah. And it's
Wow.
interesting because yeah, like now you see these e-bikes all over the place zipping
Yeah,
around, and they're quiet and they go pretty fast and the motor's so small. And yeah, he put a motor. I mean, there's a replica of the bike in the museum, and it's massive. The motor, that's on there is
yeah,
massive. And when you see the motorcycle, you're like, wow. Um, but yeah, it's been something that since the early 1900s, people have been putting motors on bikes, and trying to again go faster.
I
To
understand.
It's been pretty neat
And
to
it's
watch.
weird because you do harness that speed when you're doing something. I'm not a great bicycle rider, but I did do I'm all I can say is I understand the speed thing of driving and doing stupid stuff back in the day. As a kid, we have that, and you do understand how to manipulate speed,
Oh yeah,
and may not make sense to people that don't do it, but when you're in the zone, you understand. You're going. You know what I mean? So
right.
for him to do this, it revolutionizes everything. And now I'm thinking of airboats in Mississippi. Like
Yep.
so the KUKA Classic, are they allowed to ride anything motorized, or is it all
No,
straight up by no
yeah,
no
it's self.
but
You're
you
doing
get
your
beer
own
at
pedal.
the end, right?
You
You
do.
get beer at
Really good beer. It's a very scenic area. Um, it's a gravel race. So I think there are three different kind of courses. And I'll have to verify the actual lengths because I didn't look recently on what they are. But like the last few years they've been like a 25. Oh, actually I'm looking right now. So there's one that's like 30 miles, 31 miles, one that's like 56 miles, and then one that's 17 miles. And the thing is, so if you're a gravel cycling enthusiast, you can pick the kind of the middle, distance or the longer distance and race, or you can do that 17-mile one and just go for a ride, like just go out for a cycling ride and be part of the event. And yeah, they'd get hundreds of people from around the country have been coming and participating in it. It's been growing the last few years, and it's it starts right at the Steuben Brewing Company, overlooking the lake. You're riding through these beautiful backcountry roads and the gravel roads, the farm roads, kind of that go through the communities. You're seeing the scenery. It's so much fun. And then afterwards, they've got food, live music, libations. So it's pretty awesome. And in proximity to there are there are 4 total breweries in Hammondsport. So if you are into libations, there are 5 distilleries around there, and then, like I said, there are 14
Oh.
wineries right in that area. So I mean, you've got a choice. So even if you like beer or you don't, and the thing is, like you mentioned earlier, the dry January, which is a foreign concept to me, but some of the distilleries they make mocktails. Some of the wineries, like one winery, Vice, I mentioned earlier, they're going to be making alcohol free wine. So down the road they aren't right now, but they're working on it. So there are options though for people who aren't going to drink alcohol
And
to go and have
designated
fun.
drivers are always treasured humans.
Yes. Yeah, they are, and, but they're you can go to some of the breweries and the wineries and distilleries and get something that's not, alcohol based and still really enjoy the experiences as you mentioned before.
It
So that
is
race
about
is
the
pretty cool.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, really. Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you've got people that are focusing on helping everyone have a good time.
Yeah. It's nice, and I mean, it kinda goes back to, like, this race and other things that grassroots thing too, that small towns have a tendency to create things for people that people from all over the world love. So it's nice, you've got something that people are taking. We've got these roads we like to ride. It's so beautiful. Why not make this a race? But make this thing, and people are coming and finding out what a great place it is. And it's not, you don't have to. I will say that the traffic isn't too bad around here. It's pretty laid back. So it's a lot of the stress just kind of falls away. When you mentioned kind of when you're driving, sometimes you don't realize it, but you kind of have that tension, and even just through the course of the week when you're working and all that stuff, you don't realize how kind of like you're like this, your body is, and then when you get to a place, whether it's the ones that we're talking about or other places, just and you get to actually just kind of release that, and it's just there's something an unexpected perk, I always call it, of going to, like, small towns like that is just the tranquility and how that kind of settles into your bones, you know what I mean? A
Mm.
little bit. That serenity that we're not necessarily we need to be solitude, but we don't need solitude necessarily, but a little quiet and a little slower pace is sometimes restorative.
And human to human interaction.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Nature interaction, human
Yeah.
interaction, and it's a pattern interrupt. That's the beauty of travel. And it snaps you out of the crazy rat race kind of stuff, and we still have it. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's kind of even, the world has changed since COVID, but man, we got to get our priorities straight. Drinking wine with a lake view is kind of a good thing. Go for a cycle ride, whether you
Yeah.
compete or not, is a good thing. Now, isn't Mark Twain's home near you?
Well, Mark Twain's current home is, he's buried in Elmira. So Elmira, so Corning, New York, which I mentioned before, like if you fly into Elmira, Corning is about 10 minutes from the airport. Elmira is 5 minutes from the airport in Elmira. So Elmira is about 40 minutes from Hammondsport. Um, Mark Twain is buried there. Mark Twain married a woman, a young lady from there, and he spent 20 summers there every year. In the summer, he spent the whole summer there as Samuel Clemens. He wasn't really
Yes,
Mark Twain. He wasn't
right.
wasn't going around, doing literary stuff like that. What he was doing is writing those books. So he wrote
Yeah.
Huck Finn there. He wrote Tom Sawyer. He was writing, the Connecticut Yankee. Those things he was writing while he was in Elmira on a farm on a hill overlooking the river and the valley. They built him this octagonal little study that they put right at the edge of the property so he could actually go in and have his own writing space. And he would be out there with his cigars and his cats, and just writing. So he spent, and he would, walk into town, a couple miles into town, and get and mingle with the people. He was one of the locals, basically, and he lived there, like I said, for 20 years, the summers, and became, really, uh, important part of the community. So he's that study that he was in is now down in town at the college, Amari College. It's right there. So people can in the summertime you can go and actually get a tour of the little study and see inside it. And you can
Oh,
go to visit where he's buried. Yeah.
he's one of the best. When we think America 250, I thought he took the mickey out of everybody, man. He,
He was
there was no messing around with him.
he was pretty accomplished. He had a great sense of humor. He
Hmm.
wasn't shy about,
Sarcastic.
pointing things out in a clever way, and he certainly shined a light on a lot of things, societal things that needed to have lights shine on them. So, I mean, he was just a very talented writer. He had the skills, and he had the mind, and he had the spunk, to do all that stuff, and from what I understand, he was also just a generous, you know, person, a kind person, so
He got in trouble for being trying to tell the truth a lot,
sure
and
people do.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's important. And I think in today's age of AI, which can be a great tool, but also I hope that, we're on the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association show, and I know we all use AI as tools, but when you look at good writing, there's this the beauty of the craft. It goes with a good glass of wine. It
Sure.
goes with a well-made hamburger, which I know you guys
Oh,
do
yeah.
really well. It's those moments, and I think everything that, you've talked about on today's show for Steuben County is about just take a step back, enjoy that moment.
Yeah.
We're here for that. And there's days where the sun is beautiful and it's like, that's an ice cream day, man. That's a bicycle day. That's a
Right.
wine tasting day by the lake. But if it's gloomy, go into the winery itself, meet with the
Right.
people, have that cozy feel, go into a museum and really absorb what's around you. And I think you've just got this amazing destination. I know a lot of the writers from IFTWA, you had the conference there a couple of years ago, but stories are still coming out from all the writers. This is pretty epic, right? To see all
Yeah.
these stories. I mean, just your region and then surrounding did very well.
It would resonate with the IFTWA group, and some of the writers who have been on your show a few times, have very kindly contributed to that storytelling, when we appreciate that. I think that, one of them actually moved to Corning from
Yes,
California.
yes, she
So,
did.
which is pretty, you use the word epic, but I mean,
It's pretty
that
epic.
I mean, but it goes back to what you said,
And she was in
you
Coronado.
yeah. So, I mean, when you come to the places like that, it's not, there's something for everyone everywhere, but it's a matter of, I shouldn't say everywhere, but everybody has their own personality and their own preferences. But when you come to a place like Hammondsport or Corning or, the small towns in the Finger Lakes region, they do tend to resonate with you. And it goes back to the people, I think, I mean, really, you've got world-class experiences, whether it's one of the most remarkable glass museums in the world, or you've got winemakers that are winning awards, across the country and all these things. Those things are awesome. And you can go like horseback riding 10 minutes from that little town, and you can go for a hike. And then, like
Mm.
you said, have a freshly made craft beer that's locally sourced. The food there is remarkable. There's some great food that goes with great wine, right? And I mean, there's a lot of local farmers. There's a restaurant kind of right behind you, but where they created their own farm so they could source all their ingredients locally, and you can taste the difference. All those things are an integral part of the experience as well.
All right, so I'm thirsty, hungry, and I feel like going for a hike at the same time. I'm not getting
Yeah,
on a bike because I will fall down because I will have the glass of wine before the bike ride. I'm that stupid. But I'll create entertainment, that's for
yeah,
sure. But we go back to the arts too. Everything from Corning and the glass, the glass museum and the
right.
history there, which goes even to the history of our light bulbs. To then Mark Twain. I mean, there's just it's never ending. So thank you so much, Dave. What a
Oh, thank
great,
you.
great conversation. And
Yeah,
everyone, let's go to Steuben. Go to exploresteuben.com. And everyone, go to IFWTWA.org and learn more about the organization. We love doing these shows 3 times a month and being able to connect with these destinations, hear these stories, connect with the travel writers, photographers, authors, podcasters, you name it. It's been so much fun I think we're at like 10 years or something.
it's all good.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's
Oh,
been a
thanks
pleasure.
for you.
Happy
Nice
New
to see
Year.
you. Happy New Year to you. Hope you have a great year.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFWTWA, which is IFWTWA.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone!